Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast, where we help business leaders and business owners build and retain their dream team. On this episode, I interview Elise Moore of Bridge Coaching, and we have an excellent conversation about authenticity in leadership and learning from failure. And we answer the question, what's the cost of being an authentic leader? And on the reverse side, what does it cost to not be an inauthentic leader? And really enjoy our conversation around that. I do want to mention my new book, Master Your First Job, is still available on Amazon and at masteryourfirstjob.com. This is an excellent resource if you're someone who leads a team with young people, both for you as their leader and especially for them to help them master their first job. You can get the book and learn more at masteryourfirstjob.com. Let's dive into my conversation with Elise Moore on authentic leadership. Elise, thank you so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. You're our first international guest. So I know you're across the Atlantic right now, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about you and tell us your story.
Yeah, well, it's not normal that I'm like chilling in Italy on a podcast. So to everybody listening, this is not normal. But yeah, I'm Elise, and I'm really glad to be here today. I'm from North Carolina. Have spent most of my life there, and I'm currently there. Though I've dabbled in Georgia a little bit. Gotta love my Georgians, which you're Georgian, right?
I'm a Georgian, that's right. Big weekend we're recording this September 3rd. So the Dogs had a big win this weekend.
Yeah, I did see that. So yeah, I love Georgia. But I'm a coach, really. That's who I am. I'm a coach, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a real estate investor. I have a lot of things I like to dabble in. But I really enjoy variety, and I realized that through different iterations of my story, working a 9-to-5 job, doing my own thing, having different relationships and just different interests, and realizing that I really thrive in that variety space, and honestly, just making decisions eventually in my life to protect that and make that a part of my life and who I am. So that kind of explains why I'm in Italy, because I had a rough couple years personally and just decided, you know what, I think I need to just unplug a little bit from my normal life, where I can tend to be a driver, a pusher, and just kind of like chill and calm down. And I'm a Christian, so kind of let the Lord heal some things and fix some things in me. And so I'm like I have 2 weeks left in Italy. So I'm on the back half of that. And it's just been really, really cool. And I've gotten to run my business, Bridge Coaching, from Italy, which has been really cool. And I wasn't sure like how that would go. I told my clients that knew, I was like, y'all didn't decide to go to Italy. So this experience needs to be seamless.
Yeah. Right.
And it has. I think it's been really, really good. Made sure there was good Wi-Fi, and now I'm able to record podcasts across the world.
I love it. I love living in the 21st century, and I'm sure technology is only going to get better, but I love the chapter we get to live. You and I have a little bit of overlapping circles because of Chick-fil-A.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you work for Chick-fil-A-ish jobs, family with Chick-fil-A?
Yes, all of the above.
Yeah.
So my dad's an operator. He's a multi-unit operator in North Carolina, and a great, great leader. So his first day on the job was my first day on the job. I was 11 when I started. And I remember looking up at the big stack of trays. If you've ever worked at Chick-fil-A, you know what it feels like.
That's right.
And it was probably 2 feet taller than like the top of my head. And I just had a blue rag and was just like, this is okay. Here we go. And
Amazing.
Grew up in the restaurant, and learned a lot about leadership there. And that's really like what piqued my interest in leadership. Then I was a part of the Impact 360 family for a few years, and I loved working there. Have some really sweet relationships from that time. And I was a student there too. And then just that was the first time I was ever coached, which kind of started that process for me. John Basie, I remember he coached me through, I was having a crisis when I was 18, of course. Like, what am I going to do with my life? And of course, I was feeling really dramatic at the time. And he really helped. He met me where I was, and he processed it through with me. And I came up with a solution, and it was so empowering. And I remember thinking after that conversation, I'm going to do that one day. Like, that's what I want to do. And sure enough, here I am. So I'm really thankful I get to do this daily. It's it's the most important work that I could ever see myself doing, is coaching. So I absolutely love it. But yeah, I'm still connected with Chick-fil-A. I work
Yeah,
with a lot of Chick-fil-A owner operators. Obviously, my dad's an operator still. I eat Chick-fil-A a
all the
lot.
time. You a
Yeah.
platinum member on the app? I am.
Yeah. Well,
that's
honestly, when your dad owns it, you
that's
get
true.
some
That's true. You're
perks.
getting it for free.
However, his store is not the closest to my house. And so I definitely buy Chick-fil-A
Oh
still.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
I'm all
forever
about.
be a raving fan. And
Yeah.
then something else you mentioned, I talked about this in the last episode of this podcast, but as far as slowing down and like finding that rest and pace in your life, especially as a high achiever and someone who's ultra
Yeah.
driven, book I'll recommend to you and our audience, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry
Oh, I
by John
love
Mark
it.
Comer.
Yeah.
It to me has become on the, at least every other year, I will reread that book. So
Wow.
I've read it, I've listened to it once and read it twice at this point. Um, Amazing that it came out. It came out in November of 2019. So
Wow.
like, I mean, the timing as far
Oh,
as
yeah.
it being right before COVID, I feel like it's a God thing, and it's been a book that's tremendously helped me. And especially if you're a person of faith, I think that finding those rhythms of rest is so
Mhm.
important. And glad you're able to do that with your Europe trip. So
Yeah.
something you've talked about a lot as you and I have a conversation and with your business too is this idea of authentic leadership, especially in the
Mhm.
context of like you working with mid-level businesses. So how would you define authentic leadership?
You gave me this question beforehand, and then I was like, I don't even know. Like, I think it's more of a concept than a definition.
Yeah.
And as I was processing it, it's like this ruthless pursuit of an excellent version of yourself. Um, that's kind of what I was thinking about. It's this pursuit of excellence
Yep.
and becoming an excellent version of yourself. I think that's the leadership piece,
Love it.
but it's also like a deep awareness and understanding and contentment with who God created you to be. I think it's really important. And this has kind of become elevated in my thinking as I've been a coach, and honestly, a coach for a lot of Chick-fil-A people. You and I come from Chick-fil-A world. So
Yeah.
if you're in the Chick-fil-A space listening, sorry if this hits too close to home. I'm sorry. But I call, I don't know if this is unprofessional. I don't know. We're just going to go with it.
Go for it.
I
We're not
call
with
it,
Chick-fil-A anymore.
I call it Chick-fil-A thirsty. That's what I
Yeah.
call it, because I interact with these people who want to be owner operators and they want to become something, and they like immediately I can just tell that they lack a very large piece of like who they actually are. There's Chick-fil-A thirsty.
Mm.
They just want to be Chick-fil-A operators. And I'm like, okay, but why? Like, who are you? You know? So I see it honestly as part of my mission on earth to help people understand, like, under all the layers, dad, husband, wife, daughter, worker, employee, whatever, volunteer, coach, podcaster, famous person, like, under all these layers, what remains? And are we like fostering that piece? So that's kind of the concept that I lean into.
It's funny you saying that about Chick-fil-A. I'll tell you something that drove me nuts, and then I'll tell you something about myself that I didn't know. One, it drove me nuts at Chick-fil-A with what I perceived was a lack of authenticity. And
Mm.
this is not everyone at Chick-fil-A, but I did encounter people at Chick-fil-A that had the Chick-fil-A thirsty that you described, where it's like, man, can we just like, let's like, can you take the C off your chest for a second and like, can I like get to know you for a
Yes.
second? It just
Yes.
seemed like, there's never a bad day. It's, is everybody
Yeah.
happy?
I'm like, have you ever
Um,
said a cuss word before? Have you ever?
right.
You
Like,
know?
I'm like, hey, maybe this isn't the best that this day is going so poorly. And it drove me nuts. And then personally, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Clifton Strengths. You familiar with Clifton
Yeah.
Strengths? So like positivity and harmony are my my bottom two things, which is very, very high, like throughout Chick-fil-A. And
Oh,
Chick-fil-A
yeah.
had someone who did this at the support center with all staff. And so she had the stats of like percentage of strengths that were present in a lot of Chick-fil-A
Mhm.
people. And those are two things that are literally top five for the company. And it's two
Wow.
bottom things for me. And so a lot of like personal conflict there, being
Mhm.
surrounded by it and it not being something I'm good at or need. Um,
Yeah.
and then two, like you talk about like what's unique about you rather than your company. And I think this is
Mhm.
applicable to all companies, not just Chick-fil-A, but there's a leader at Chick-fil-A. named Rob Dugas. He's retired now, but he worked in learning and development. And something when he came into his new position when I was there, he said, "Hey, just so you know, first top 5 things about me," or he listed 5 things, and he's like, "You'll notice Chick-fil-A is not one of them because I don't think Chick-fil-A is a top 5 thing about me." And I'm like
Mm,
applauding, like, yes, exactly. And I'm like, yeah, look at all these people who have Chick-fil-A as a top 5 thing about you. What I didn't realize was Chick-fil-A was 100% a top 5 thing about me, even though I didn't think it was
mm,
until it
mm.
was gone. And when it was gone, I had to like grieve this. I'm no
Yeah,
longer a part of this company that I spent 10 years of my life with. I'm like, it's a significant portion of your life as well. I'm like, you can
yeah.
understand this. Um, when I wasn't in the day to day of that anymore, I was like, man, I guess it was a top 5 thing
Mhm.
about me. And so I did a lot of introspective of like, who am I without Chick-fil-A? What does that
Yeah.
look like? And in the best way, learning new things about me of like, oh yeah, this was a part of my job at Chick-fil-A, but it is something outside of Chick-fil-A that I can be good at.
Yes.
So I love this idea of authenticity. It's a quality that I've always incredibly valued in people
Mhm,
and in leaders.
mhm.
Why do you think authenticity is so crucial for leaders?
Well, I wanna hit on something really quick
Yeah.
before we get there, so you might have to ask that question again, but
Yeah.
I think one of the hard parts about companies like Chick-fil-A where and it's funny because positivity and harmony are definitely in my top 5, um, which is
Yeah.
hilarious. But I have this dedication to the truth at all costs, and I don't know
Mhm.
where that comes from in me, but I think that's what I was really fed up with Chick-fil-A as a culture is it was so nice. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
I'm like, I'm mad and I can't, I feel like I can't show it. And I was a young employee back then, like didn't know how to handle conflict well. And I just felt like there were a lot of robots and I
Yeah.
hate that. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? And, I think once I started my own leadership journey, I realized like, oh, there's some great people within Chick-fil-A, period,
Mhm.
that like
Period.
really fight against that. Like, definitely. And then there's some great other companies that are still really values aligned with
Mhm.
me and are way more real. And they've taught me a lot about myself. And now I
Mhm.
feel like I'm able to positively influence people at Chick-fil-A who are might struggle with that a little bit, especially younger leaders who are that Chick-fil-A thirsty. I get to just challenge them and be like, okay, like what happens when you're on your deathbed and you're looking back and you're like, I did Chick-fil-A, is that it, So I'm thankful that Chick-fil-A is aware of it, and I hope that they continue to like put resources towards educating people and becoming someone, not just a Chick-fil-A operator. That's my rant.
No, it's
um,
good.
yeah. So, anyways, your question was about why it's so crucial, right?
Yeah. Why is authenticity like? I think it's important, but I mean, how do you see it as crucial for leaders today?
In my opinion, it comes back to values.
Mm.
Um, Kind of like that big life question. And that's something I've wrestled with a lot since being in Europe. Like, what's it all for, really?
Yeah.
Like when I'm at the end of my life, and the Bible talks a lot about this of like kind of who you're becoming. And when I'm at the end of my life, like, do I really want to look back and see a big number in my bank account or 3 successful 7-figure businesses? Or, and I do want to see some of those things, but
Right.
it's like
Right. Right.
at what cost? And so I think when you decide to not be authentic, it costs something. And that might be like someone else needing to interact with who God made you to be. It might be your family. It might be finances. It always costs something. I have a story of when I was at a different company. I handled a situation like I thought my boss would, not how I would.
Yeah.
And when I tell you it explosively blew up, it was really bad. And I was so embarrassed. And I was like, I knew what to do. My gut knew what to do. I just didn't do it because I didn't honor that, like that part of me that I knew what to do. And that taught me so much of like, man, I won't ever do that again. Of not because it messed up the situation for a lot of people. And I think that was the cost for that situation. So it always costs something. You have to determine what does it cost? Like what does it cost me to
Yeah.
not be an authentic leader? So that's kind of like my take, but I'm curious your thoughts actually.
I was thinking of an example as you were talking about this. Like, what does it cost? Because I think what it can cost you is it can cost you your team. And I had someone one time, I won't share the exact situation, but it seemed like, and this always happens in corporate world, where a decision gets made above your head,
Yeah.
and then you have to put on the face and tell people below you what the decision is.
Yeah.
And it was a situation where when we were being told about a decision that was made way above our heads, it was presented as this like amazing, great thing. And it was like, hey, look at this opportunities are where they choose a Chick-fil-A a lot. And it's like, oh, look at this amazing opportunity. And what was felt by everyone in the moment is this is an awful thing. Like, I
Mm.
wish a leader would have stood up here and been like, hey, this is above my head.
Mhm.
Here's the talking points I've been said I can say, but like, I'm really sorry. What can we do to make this the best thing
Yes.
possible? And not, this is an amazing thing. And I had someone turn to me and said they've lost the locker room. And I'm a big sports
Wow.
fan, and I'm like, I've seen culture in teams. You can have the most talented team in the world, but as soon as you lose the locker room as a coach and you
Mm.
like people stop believing in you as a leader, you're going to see performance drop like that. And so, like, to
Yes.
me, being a leader is really about serving the team beneath you and not about serving the boss above you. You have to balance both well, but
Yeah.
like, whenever you use the locker room, you're going to start losing results on the upside
100%.
too. And
Yeah.
so that's an example I thought of just like, what does it cost? It can cost you your team to not be an authentic leader,
Mhm.
and it can cause you losing the locker room, which is an analogy I
Yeah.
like a lot.
One of the thoughts I'm thinking when it comes to how to become a more authentic leader is I think authentic leaders, my friend says they shoot the elephant in the room, but that's kind of crass. So they point at the elephant in the room.
Yep.
They look at it. And your example made me think of that because it's like everybody's thinking it.
Right. Everybody's thinking about it. Yep.
Everybody's thinking it. And when you choose to not say what everybody's thinking, people think they assume you're out of touch and you lose the team. But if I acknowledge and even just name like, hey, I know this sucks. And like I'm wrestling with this too, but I'm also trying to manage this. So
Yep.
just give me some time or something. Like you're automatically human and people trust you again. And when you have people's trust, you can do a lot.
Give another example just because it made me think of a leader who did this well. I'm like, I'll tell a very positive example
Yeah.
from Chick-fil-A. Um, I joined Chick-fil-A right as COVID started, I was in a program called the Talent Development Program. And I mean, my first day was March 9th, 2020. And if you remember that
Oh
week,
my
that
gosh.
was the week the world shut down. So, like, my third day, they told us it's March 11th. They were like, hey, Chick-fil-A has decided they're going to test their virtual capability for the next 2 days. Like, take all your stuff home. We're just going to see if stuff changes, how we would be working from home. And they did not open up the office again for another 2 years. So that testing for 2 days lasted a little while.
Yeah.
But Chick-fil-A had a meeting the next week, and they announced that they would be doing no layoffs during COVID. Like,
Mm.
that they had, Chick-fil-A was in a really good spot financially, no layoffs, which is a big announcement because I mean, no one knew what was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
We had a meeting the next day where our leader for TDP told us, hey, just so you know, that didn't apply to you guys. Um,
Mm.
and again, I appreciated the authenticity, the
Mhm.
realness, but then there was a plan. It was like, hey, I'm not going to try to hide, because we were all like, hey, we're this development program. Are we full
Yeah.
time staff? Are we this? And addressed it, pointed it out, and was like,
Mhm.
hey, that actually didn't apply to you guys. We're working on a plan in the meantime. Like, your leader's going to work with you to get your resume ready. And we're reaching out to like all these other companies in Atlanta just in case.
Yeah.
And it ended
Wow.
up that the program was fine and we were included in the no layoffs. But I appreciated a leader being like, hey, this is a
Yes.
bad situation. There's no, like, we're not going to pretend it's good. It's
Yeah.
bad. I'm with you. Here's the plan.
Yep.
And I think that to me is authenticity, is just like you said, acknowledging that there is an elephant in the room
Mhm.
and being okay with the uncomfortability, I think is a
Yes.
good thing.
Which if you're a positivity person or a harmony person, that's hard. Like that took
Yeah.
me some time. And maybe to the young leaders listening, it might be something you have a muscle you have to work, and that's okay. I remember being in meetings where my gut was kind of telling me, like, I think you should speak up, like something's
Mm,
off here.
yeah.
And I wouldn't, and then someone else would, and they would say what I was thinking, and it would start a beautiful conversation about where the direction needed to go. And those little cues helped me learn, like, okay, here's how I could have spoken up, or I definitely should have said something there, or it might have been good that I kind of kept that quiet at that point. But I think it's worth it to like use your brain and pay attention to what's going on, because
Yeah.
I find people who are willing to just step into the uncomfortable, like, oh, let me just tap that. Like, let's just tap that for a
Uh-huh.
second. Usually they end up going further because they're willing to say the hard thing.
Yep.
There's a video by Simon Sinek and it's called Be the Idiot in the Room. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I've skimmed through it, but I know what you're talking about.
I love this video. And Simon Sinek is like brilliant.
Yeah.
He's stupid smart,
Uh-huh.
really successful. He talks about this time where he was consulting a group of people. This is such an authentic leadership moment, in my opinion. Um, there's C-suite executives. He's like brought in to consult them. Someone gives a marketing plan, and Simon Sinek has no idea what's going on. He's like, okay, I'm sorry, this is in over my head. Everybody's pretending like they know what's going on. So he stops the meeting and he goes, hey, I'm sorry, I have no idea what's happening. And every single person in the room is like, okay, we
Me
don't either.
neither.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
right.
much. And I was like, that is the perfect example of like, say it, say what you're thinking, you know? And it caused redirection and probably a huge money saver for that company. But I think that's a great example too.
So I think part of being authentic too is being uncomfortable, like being okay with failure. In your
Yeah.
experience, how important is failure in the journey of a leader?
I think it's incredibly important. I think it's also probably one of the most feared things that I interact with in leaders. Like people are so scared of failure. And that might be the beginning journey for you if you're listening and you're thinking like how the heck do I become more authentic? It's being okay with failing. When we're scared to fail, we posture, and that's exactly against being authentic. So if you're scared to fail, you put a front up and you posture and you're not willing to really admit that you're wrong or pivot or learn. And it becomes your identity as being this leader that's not authentic. And for me, it goes back to my faith to in a sense too, because it's like I don't have to be perfect. And that's so much weight off. It
Yep.
allows me to become a better leader. But we have to fail. We have to be okay with it. Find friends that are okay with you failing. Like if you don't have friends that you can't fail in front of, get a new batch. Like
You and I are coaches. I gravitate a lot towards. I love college football, so I gravitate a lot towards. I think sports is a great teacher, but Kirby Smart, Georgia's head coach, he said something at a press conference last week. Someone asked him a question about his defensive backs and he like how he coaches them, and it was a question about like them winning reps and stuff. And he's like, how are these new young defensive backs going to respond? And he just said, I do not expect them to win every rep. They're going to lose reps. Like the wide receivers are going to catch the ball. They're going to give up catches,
yeah.
whatever. He's like, I'm okay with that. The expectation is not that they win every rep. I do expect them to respond well whenever they give up a catch. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, to me, failure is about response. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
the expectation that you will fail. That does not mean don't try to
Mm-hmm.
avoid failure. Like, I think don't be okay with mediocrity. But
Yeah.
whenever you do slip and fall, it's how do you respond? Are you going to stay on the ground? Or are you going to get back up and realize
Mm-hmm.
that there was a wet floor sign you probably should have seen before and make sure you
Yeah.
look out for it next time?
Honestly, I gauge a leader's security in themselves on how they win big and fail big.
Hmm.
Because if they're winning big and it is everything to them, I immediately know they have no sense of self
Yeah.
because that's their self, their sense of self. And if they fail big and they lose it all, they lose themselves, I also know that they don't have a sense of self. We want to be right in the middle on both
Right.
sides where we're level. And that is reflective, in my opinion, of very authentic awareness of who you are
Yeah.
and a leadership out of that.
I love that. I heard someone say too one time that failure is not the best teacher. Someone else's failure is the best teacher. And I was like, no, it's great because it's like, if you can avoid the pain and learn from someone else who made the same mistake, absolutely do it.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, if you failed and you know how to be better the next time, then you have the responsibility to share that
Mm-hmm.
with other people and say, hey, as someone who
Mm-hmm.
cares about you, can I help? Like, can I show you something I did? Which to me shows authentic leadership and be like, I failed in this area.
Yes.
Like, can I show you how I would have done it differently the next time so that you can
Yeah.
avoid the same mistake I made?
Yeah. I love the book Mindset. That's one of the best books I recommend.
Yep.
It's on failure, or it just talks about like growth mindset versus
Uh-huh.
fixed mindset. And I had heard those terms all the time. I was like, oh, yeah, growth, fixed, blah, blah, blah. Then I read the book and I was like, oh my gosh, I live in a fixed mindset all the time. Like I
Yep.
truly don't give myself the freedom to fail. And I'm holding myself back here. So if you guys are curious about a resource, that's a great place to start, in my opinion.
I'll link that in the episode too. I have a bookshelf right here that's my favorite books and like the books that had the biggest impact. That is on the shelf. So
Yes.
shout out
Yeah.
to Dr. Carol Dweck for
Dr.
mindset.
Dweck, she's
Um,
amazing.
What final thoughts do you have on leadership, failure? We've talked about authenticity. Like, if you could just give one piece of advice that someone could say, you know what, I listened to this podcast episode, I can do this one thing this week. What would it be?
Mhm. I think I would just challenge them to think about who they want to be. And at the end of their lives, when they're looking back on their lives, do they want to be Chick-fil-A thirsty? Do they want to be like, do they want to be able to, do they want to tell their kids like, yeah, I actually did it perfectly? You
Right.
don't really want, you want to be who you are, and you want to be an excellent version of that, failures and all. And they get to, like, you guys get to make that decision. You get to decide how you do that. No one else can decide that for you, but you can do it if you want to.
Absolutely. Elise, where can people find out more about you and Bridge Coaching?
Okay, well, I'm on Instagram, honestly, Elise Moore. The honestly is kind of like the authentic.
There you go. I love it.
I also have a podcast called Honestly Elise. So tune into the podcast if you want. And Bridge Coaching is on Instagram too, but there's no I in it. That's like a catch. But I have a team of coaches I work with, and we're slowly building and adding people to our coaching roster. So I don't really like the word roster. Our coaching group.
See, I love the word roster because it's a football thing.
But it makes the people sound like a number. You're not a number.
Yeah, right. You're not a number.
But it's our coaching family. How about that?
Yep. That's
Very
right.
harmony, positive of me.
That's right.
But yeah, that's where you can find me. Instagram is where I spend a lot of time. I post a ton on Instagram and LinkedIn. So find me there.
I love it. Which I will link in the episode description. Elise, thank you so much for being on Waves Business Coaching.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.